Now, a lot of people think toxic masculinity was coined by who? Feminism.
Yeah.
And that sword is swung by black feminists, right?
Yeah.
To, scoot you in the corner whenever they feeling, you know what I'm saying? Like they don't have an answer. Oh, you being toxic, right? but I found out that toxic masculinity came from the mythopoetic men's movement. We there.
100,000.
Because we was there.
100,000.
You thought you was going to get me.
No.
Yeah, you did.
I was ready. Continue, my brother. Continue.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to The Safe House, a podcast based on exploring masculinity from various perspectives. Masculinity seems to be defined by others with outside agendas. There's a need to have safe space conversations that everyone is allowed to witness. There have been certain misnomers that propel societal groups to assume that masculinity is a pejorative. We would like to invite the listeners into a judgment-free zone as various topics on the subject of masculinity are explored, researched, and expressed. Today's episode, the redefinition.
True indeed. I'm Freddy Jones, a.k.a. Musab Yassir Bey, a.k.a. the blue-collar scholar for this shit. You know what I'm saying?
For sure.
Because I'm a unionist,
Absolutely. And I'm interesting, which means giving you out-of-the-box thinking, thought points, etc.
I thought it was so apropos that we named this shit Safe House. Yeah. Because the definition of safe house is a place, a secret location for spies and criminals. And that's what they term niggas.
Oh, yeah, they label us.
But yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
And it reminded me of Abraham Lincoln's last case before he became president. Is when he won his case with William Dungy, he said that being a Negro is illegal. That being a Negro is criminal.
What's also interesting too, I think, is in how in that primary, Lincoln was being called the N-word president, etc.
Exactly.
People conveniently forget that in history.
Yeah.
For sure.
Because what was coursing through his veins.
You know.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
But I want to define my position in it, and I want to be clear. I'm a black masculinist. I'm a qualify that.
Claim it, AKA
black masculinist. And as a black masculinist, because of what we're up against, because we have enemies afoot. I'm talking about from white supremacy to the variants of white supremacy, which is feminism and all the et ceteras. But as a black masculinist, I advocate for the needs and rights for black men because I know that when you fix the floor, everything else comes up. So when you fix... We're the bottom casted of the bottom cast. Absolutely. So when you fix us, you can fix everybody else.
Oh, absolutely.
So it's not a shot against, nobody else, but I do know that it's the need for us to create the space to be able to build because black men, black boys need tending to.
And I think it's important too that we talk about that from a framework of, not because we're helpless, but because we're relentlessly attacked.
Exactly.
And that's a whole different ball game than somebody just sitting on the sidelines needing a handout or help. We're like, hey, can you let your foot up?
Exactly.
Absolutely.
So that's the thing. We need to, hey, look, all that bootstrapper shit, you know what I'm saying? We always had agency. Yeah. We always showed agency. They just burned down our shit. Yeah. Every time we showed agency because we the first black capitalists. Yeah. You get what I'm saying? Yeah, we was the first ones that didn't have federal aid doing what we did. But for the sake of the position that we're holding in terms of masculinity, because this is going to be a ramifying topic. Yeah. I want to go into masculinity, the definition, the redefinition of masculinity.
Let's do that. Jump into
So I want to go with, because I have a mentor. He told me if you want to know the source of a river, you got to follow it upstream. So, my thing is an etymology thing. I need to trace the word back.
Absolutely.
So I go to the oldest text because the oldest is always the better. You know what I'm saying?
How old you go?
I'm going to go to 1948. Webster's Collegiate Dictionary, maybe the 5th edition.
Oh, okay.
So masculinity states in that is male, manly. The second one is belonging to or consisting of males, appropriate to or used by males. The third definition is suitable to or characteristics of a man, virility, robust. Sometimes woman, mannish. So a woman can be masculine. The fourth definition is conforming to or denoting conformity to class of words, viewed as distinguished for males. The next thing it says, see gender, masculinity, gender. Now, let me belabor this a little bit.
Okay. Because I'm wondering where you're coming with
Yeah.
that. The buddy that wrote that is Miriam.
Yeah, masculinity.
Miriam.
Yeah, and we're going to go back there.
Work
We're
that
gonna go,
word,
because we got to
yeah.
go to patriarchy, too.
Absolutely.
So masculinity, gender. Gender, genre.
Yeah.
Because that's what that means.
Yeah, for sure.
With excrescent, that means protruding, phallics, protruding, something coming out.
Yeah.
Colloquial, it's sex, males or females.
Mm-hmm.
The interesting thing about gender is, in most Indo-European culture languages, gender is defined in 3. Males, females, and neutered. My position is the black man is neutered in this country. And we're gonna get back to that. But I wanna touch on that because the original thing is gender is defined as 3. Originally. They scribbled that out of it. You know what I'm saying? So the third thing they say C6. Then we go to the origin of the English words, a discursive dictionary of the Indo-European roots, Joseph T. Shipley. Mas, for masculinity, M-A-S. Male, mass, diminutive, masculine, male, masculine, emasculate. So I'm saying this because at every step of the way, we can't get away from femininity or the other side of it.
Yeah, you got to define things holistically.
Because
Yin and
it's
yang.
obverse and reverse, right?
Absolutely.
But we go back to the origin story. Let's give a backstory. What gave rise to this whole thing?
Oh.
The spirited conversation we had.
Yeah, for sure. Over sticks.
Sweet Lips.
Yeah.
2 months ago, because we wrote this show. It was a brainchild of EQ.
Yeah.
We built on it, and then it came to us in Sweet Lips.
Absolutely. Yeah.
As we're building, we had a discussion about being pulled over by cops.
Yeah.
And so we had
fun topic, right?
we had views on that, like how will we handle it?
Yeah.
And my point was, and I didn't have any pushback to anybody's position on it.
Yeah, it didn't seem adversarial.
No, because I'm sympathetic to any black man's response to it because we're behind enemy lines. We're
Absolutely.
not.
And everyone's experience is personal.
My point was, when you concede to a cop to make it a day home, like just make it home,
Yeah.
right? What type of man is that building in America over generations? A neutered black man, to which you said, what was your point?
Oh, I mean, so essentially, you know, taking a stand in where your life is in a balance, you know, for what? And we have to be strategic about what our outcomes look like. If we are provoked in a way in which we respond and get murdered for it, I mean, that sounds like the plot and handing it to, you know, Eurocentrism on a platter to me. So, yeah, I think your point is important because it hits on the actual therapy that is needed in growing up as a black man in America.
Yeah.
I think that, you know, it's necessary to talk about the things that, you know, are impacting us, but are like hitting arrows, if you will. And you're taking them every time that you stop, and you have to, you know, become docile and less of a man in those efforts to
So what
make
does
it home.
that create? Like, like when you hit me with, we have to be methodical.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
I'm thinking on the other side of that, what type of man does that produce when you can't express your virility or being angered at something?
Yeah, I think it goes back to, you know, some of the traditional tenets of what is Eurocentric masculinity, which is brute strength, muscle bound, etc. But we're thinking human beings first. We're not physical first. We're brain oriented. And so from a neurological standpoint, you should always be playing chess. That's your most important muscle. That's the one that's going to get you home. Not your arms, not your legs. It's always somebody who can lift more weights than you, run faster, etc. You got to be a thinking man. And a human being is a thinking man by default.
So they go back to the redefinition of masculinity. How does masculinity look? What do we call a masculinity?
So yeah, I think there's a lot of different types of masculinity, and I think Ray Connell hit on this pretty well when she described it as masculinities. Now, a little background about Ray Connell, Australian professor, sociology professor, and born male, and then transitioned to a woman later in life. And the way she defined masculinity was from a Eurocentric power structure perspective, calling it Northern versus Southern theory. Yeah. But essentially, what her findings from a cultural perspective revealed was that our ancient version of masculinity was actually what people define as fluid, and on top of that, anti-aggressive, colonial, Eurocentric masculinity. So we're in fact the opposite of what people define as toxic masculinity. The term she used hegemonic, absolutely. So
even with hegemonic masculinity, when you look at the definition, it's legitimizing dominance over a subordinate group.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That's a Eurocentric.
Oh yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But it goes to other places too, because we're not the only people dominated. You know what I'm saying? Because you go to social dominance theory, it's a theory that looks at every group that's dominated, how the top man treats the bottom man in competition for the resources, which is the women. Hey, but it was crazy that you said that, though. I want to go back to hegemonic.
Yeah. Before you go back to that, Fred, I got a question for you.
What's that?
From the outside, because we got some other brothers here, and every now and then, topic of masculinity, we got some masculinity in the room.
Appreciate you.
The conversation about the police. So, Fred, are you taking a stance, and correct me if I'm wrong, that if the police was to pull me over or to pull your son over, and he had his hands on the wheel and he was cooperating with the police in a respectable manner, you feel like that's a lack of masculinity?
My point is, I'm sympathetic to whatever a black man's reaction is into that situation, because we're behind enemy lines. That's my point. My reaction, and has always been, is to not to puff up or brood up, but to let them know that I know the law. That don't always work out for us. You get what I'm saying? I've been lucky enough to make it home, but I've done some dumb shit. You know what I'm saying? Well, I've been pulled out on, at a young age, 15, 16.
Let me add that real quick too. So, we talk about that perspective. Think about the wide range of reactions white males get, right, in those situations. They don't always react the same. There's some who 10 and 2 on the steering wheel, then there's some with a finger in your face. Yet their masculinity or humanity is respected more in terms of being able to, go home or express the way they choose to feel, because they're this type of man. It's like we can only be one type of man, obedient. And that doesn't work.
But I think they're going to social dominance theory because it's still a hierarchical, because of how white men are bred in this country to be with the virility, like, why am I getting pulled over? You know what I'm saying? Like, my thing is I want to maintain what I perceive is manhood throughout the whole entire thing. Because I picture my son watching me in this whole endeavor. I picture my woman watching me in this whole endeavor. Because we've seen movies where they frisk our women and we have to sit and take it.
And the way you even touched on the women thing is important, because when defining, hegemonic or even Eurocentric masculinity, take Code of Hammurabi, right? In it defines masculinity, or at least what a husband is, based off of what his wife does not do. So if you do not sleep with him, that is not your wife. So, I think that's impactful, because their center point is always guided about how they are doing or what they are doing to someone else or another group of people, instead of an internal definition.
Yeah, but I think that's the subaltern theory that I was looking at in terms of how Europeans look at shit. Because we're still socially dominated.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So our view of masculinity is skewed because we under suppression. So we get a skewed look at what masculinity is.
And we're not rewarded for our own version of masculinity.
Exactly. Yeah. So when he asked the question about what I do, my thing is, I didn't have a certain position. I know how I handle it. I'm sympathetic to however you handle it. Your thing was more methodical. My thing is, what does that do to a man to be able to tuck
What's
in?
the impact?
Yeah, over time. Because we got baby boomers who cowards. Like, I don't like baby boomers, and people know that I don't like baby boomers. But I think baby boomers fucked up like a lot of shit. You know what I'm saying? No. But the reason why I'm saying it is because the people in the 40s laid ground for the baby boom. Like, they were really killing white people in World War II and beyond. And the baby boomers had it relatively well. Now, I ain't saying they had it like stupendous. I'm just saying relatively well. When the unions got popping, you can be at Southwestern Bell for 50 years and you be like, hey, I got mine, go get yours. That's baby boomers. Baby boomers, hey boy, you better not.
And I think that was born out of some comforts, right?
Yeah.
The federal government realized that if they give you a few set of comforts, you're going to be less hostile and less upset at your conditioning. But then what does that say about us in the natural evolution of that? What are we? If they're pampered, what are we?
I got a quick interjection.
Yeah.
So what's up?
Fred said he don't like baby boomers, and we were talking.
No, I don't.
One of my questions, and this is for everyone, where did you get your first views of masculinity from?
So right off the top, father, you know what I mean? Like, that's the first man I interacted with, knew. And then, the men he kept, or the men that...
Was he a baby boomer?
Yo, he's definitely a boomer. Oh, my papa's a boomer. He ARP. Shout out Dad. But yeah, so, or the men, the quality of men my mama would put me around. Yeah. And so I think that has a huge part in shaping your identity. But I never really felt mine was gender oriented. Like, I didn't feel like, because I have, a male appendix, that means I got a dick. So
but that's my problem with my first encounter with masculinity is my father and my grandfather's. Yeah. And it was expressed not in a brutish manner or brusque manner. It was more so, hey, go do it. And if you don't do it, you know what I'm saying? Like, on some Jay Prince shit. You know what I'm saying? These are old country guys who fought in World War II, World War I. Yeah. You know that they got busy and they got the blood on their hands still. Like, you ain't let nobody question they gangster. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, for sure.
So it was a different expression of masculinity than what we taught to look at. But my thing about masculinity is it expresses itself different. So the redefinition is important because when you said hegemonic masculinity, before that, it was compensatory masculinity. Mm-hmm. So you did R.W. Connell, Ray Will Connor. Mm-hmm. Compensatory masculinity was out of the book called The Second Assault, Rape Attitudes, and it was in the late 70s, right before the hegemonic masculinity.
Absolutely.
And it was by Karen Holmes and Joyce Williams, who blamed black men as we're compensating because what we lack, because we want to be white men.
Yeah.
That was their view. But you see, you got a whole line of thinking about black men in terms of we're striving for patriarchal goals from white men. Mm-hmm. You get what I'm saying? So that was compensatory masculinity. So you got compensatory, hegemonic, and then we land at what? Today's shit.
Yeah.
Toxic masculinity.
Right. No, and I think, that's important because when you're talking about societies or economic systems or social systems that are built on the hierarchy of someone at the top of a pyramid, then you're not even allowed the freedom of defining your own masculinity with respect to the oppression energy above you. And so even then we're not born free. You mean in that same opinion, we're still not born free.
And that was the thing about the white man is he didn't look at anybody as a man. So the Jews have the same story. It's just we had our unique experience made them turn up on us even more because they didn't view anybody can get sodomized by them because they were the only males on the yard. You know what I'm saying? But we talked about toxic masculinity earlier. And I found something out interesting about toxic masculinity.
What'd you find out?
Now, a lot of people think toxic masculinity was coined by who? Feminism. Yeah. And that's word is swung by black feminists, right? Yeah. To, scoot you in the corner whenever they feeling, you know what I'm saying? Like they don't have an answer. Oh, you being toxic, right? but I found out that toxic masculinity came from the mythopoetic men's movement. We there.
100,000.
Because we was there.
100,000.
You thought you was going to get me.
No.
Yeah, you did. You thought you was
Continue, my brother. Continue.
But okay. My man, we got a man in the house. Our main man, Rob J. He always asks me about Jordan Peterson. And I thought it was interesting that we're talking about toxic masculinity. Because let's go ahead and thread this needle. Toxic masculinity was made by the Mythos men's movement by a dude named John Shepard, Robert Bly, and Joseph Campbell. Joseph Campbell is the big man to Jordan Peterson.
Right.
That's his muse. That's his elder, his mentor. He died in 87.
Yeah.
The Mythos poetic men's movement was to combat what? Feminism. White boys combating feminism and all the emasculating shit that was confronted to them. They wanted to go back to a pre-industrial form of manhood.
And I think it's important you brought up Jordan Peterson, because that's also a person that doesn't believe in systematic racism.
Yeah, But let's walk, because we're going to get there.
Yeah.
But we're going to go back to Jordan Peterson, because I want to break down his whole constitution.
If you want to use our time for that.
No, I'm not. It's toxic masculinity. The mythopoetic manhood, male, whatever. They invented the term toxic masculinity to differentiate between hypermasculinity and effeminism, because they felt like motherfuckers was getting effeminate. It's time to get hard. You know, in the 80s and the 90s. Their whole point was, we need to turn this shit up. So they invented rituals, because all these dudes is essayists, journalists, professors at whatever.
Right.
But they gathered rituals to be able to create a bondhood, a malehood, to be able to go on camping trips. Say that men need to be away from women to be able to get a bond. If we're gonna compete like soldiers.
And that's straight out of, books out of the Greek mythology, Greek society. Like, they always educated boys and girls differently, right? The island of Lesbos, that's where you educated girls.
Exactly.
Some terms there, Lesbos. Yeah. And then gymnasia, which is the Greek translation for that is naked. So they're teaching boys in gymnasiums. You do the math.
So that's the interesting part about it. I don't know. My thing is, I agree with what they were doing, but we don't agree for the same reasons, because they're white supremacists. But my point is, they came up with this movement and they invented the term toxic masculinity to combat younger guys that was being too hyper masculine, and to combat against effeminizing, because they think shit was getting sweet in the 80s and the 90s. So they didn't want shit to get too moist. So they were combating gay shit. They were like, oh, they saw this shit long ago, that this shit. But what I'm saying is, toxic masculinity got used, weaponized, and co-opted by feminists, white feminists, and the lapdogs, black feminists.
Yeah, I feel like that's a strong statement to call them lapdogs.
White feminists
in the way of peddling toxic masculinity.
Ranch hands.
I call that.
They're ranch hands.
Because if you're gonna peddle toxic masculinity to black men, that's incorrect use of the term for sure.
Yeah.
Without a doubt.
No, I'm not. Yeah, exactly. What I'm saying is, the lapdogs of white women feminism is black.
Oh, I heard
feminism.
You. Yeah, I heard.
I'm going to reiterate that.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Because this is a ramifying topic. We're gonna go into feminism.
Because we got to be honest, there are some black feminists that are against anti-white feminism.
Yeah, and that go into the Combahee River movement. But we're gonna get there. Yeah. This is not the show for it. But you know what I'm saying? I want to go into that.
Make sure we cover the whole grand scale of black feminism.
But to be continued on feminism.
Yeah,
but my point is, toxic masculinity was created by white boys.
Oh yeah,
combating this weak shit that was going on in the 80s and 90s, and they saw it. You know what I'm saying? And it's a couple other books I want to talk about later on when we start building, and you know what I'm saying, building up the platform. But I thought it was interesting because their whole thing was to create a system of rituals, degree structures, to be able to bring manhood back in. And it's almost
but you get why? Like,
I get it.
It's about the physical appearance of manliness rather than the actual essence. So what they're doing is saying, let's not reveal ourselves as being this broader spectrum of sexual orientation, you name it. let's brand ourselves as these strong masculine men, and then we can do whatever we want behind closed
And that's my
doors.
point. Just because we agree, don't mean we agree for the same reason.
Oh, yeah, for
because
sure.
we can agree on gun rights, right? But I want my gun to protect me. Those white boys want their guns to shoot me.
Yeah.
Even though we're agreeing on the same
The
thing.
opportunity,
That's why
yeah.
we gotta.
Or the fear of the big.
Yeah, but
the big
that's
black,
what I'm saying.
big black criminal.
We got to know why we like just because we agree that ain't where it
Oh
stops.
yeah, no, for sure.
You know what I'm saying? We agree for the same
And
thing. but
context
for-
matters.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
exactly. So the mythos poetic movement
Yeah.
was coined. They coined the phrase, and it was been co-opted, and then we end up here. But a lot of people think that feminists coined that term. You know, but basically, we need to create a space for us to speak freely.
And that's the purpose of the podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you know?
it's about, having this space where you can be challenged on your thoughts and your ideas, but ultimately you feel safe enough to explore the realm of your imagination.
free from canceling.
Yeah. So
You know what I'm
this
saying?
this should be the free as you feel, as opposed to going to that 9 to 5 or whatever else.
Yeah.
We all have to do on some level. So
we want to open the floor to ideas of masculinity because like R.W. Connell said that it's a whole broad spectrum.
Yeah.
Because gendering is in it and a lot of other shit, but ideas on masculinity.
absolutely.
So I was listening to, y'all little going back and forth a second ago.
Uh-huh.
And my question is, does a type of masculinity relate to your environment? Like I heard y'all talking about hypermasculinity and toxic masculinity.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
a great question.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I think there is a cultural impact to, how a person will define masculinity. And in fact, the person that we continuously have been quoting, R.W. Connell, defines it as masculinities that have changed over time due to, cultural impact, societal impact.
And behavior
Yeah.
is predicated off of your environment.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing.
So another question is but does it doesn't never go away. It just maybe one outweighs the other at a certain point.
No, I personally think that we should go back to a West African culture and breakdown of masculinity and view that because in Africa we had predominantly masculine and matriarch. We had a feminist and a matriarchal and a patriarchal society.
So hold on real quick. So to answer your question though, I agree. I think every time a new construct of masculinity has been introduced, you see remnants of it still today. At some point, some person is practicing it on some level, whether they're conscious of it or not. So I think once it exists and it's out there for consumption, people will gravitate to it, even if it's 4 or 5.
But we got to make a delineation on what we're talking about because you're talking about masculinity and patriarchy. Because what we're under right now is a white male patriarchy, and it's phobed off as masculinity. But it's you know what I'm saying? Because white male patriarchy is one thing. We can do the definition of patriarchy, but white male patriarchy in this country, we're talking about American patriarchy, is predicated off of the white man dominant and the white woman assist him in his dominance, and they phobe it off as feminism, but they really work with him to be able to get the resources. Now where we at now is feminism of fighting for over the resources to share with him or to split with him or to be able to rule with him, not to be equal or do anything transformative. It's like, you ruling, I want to rule too.
Yeah,
I don't want to be fair.
And that ties into women's suffrage. Like they just wasn't gonna sit back and just let black males get the right to vote, and they could not.
You hit it. You hit it.
When you hit it on from that perspective too, basically what white men ended up deciding to do, or European ancestry men, was we don't want to start a gender war. We rather start a race war. A gender war.
So we're gonna give you these
a
concessions.
gender war blocks us off from all of the luxuries we enjoy.
And I'm glad you said it,
Whereas
because-
race gives them that intersectionality that they get to play
Exactly.
with. Absolutely.
So
swapping them.
and one of
Moving
the
the black woman up, moving
one
the
of the
white
ways
woman
they
up.
swapped it
Yeah,
out
for
was
sure.
giving them the Infancy Child Act. Like, I'm gonna give you the child.
Yeah.
I'll still rule, but I'll give you the child.
Yeah.
You know what I'm
I still
saying?
get to govern
Exactly.
what happens to the child, etc.
Exactly, because I run the court.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
I'm
yeah,
a
for
judge. You ain't gonna never be a judge, bitch.
Yeah.
I'm you. That's what he's saying. You know what I'm saying?
Safe space. Safe space.
Exactly.
Yeah,
What's
for
up?
sure.
What's up?
All right, so I'm definitely, man, receiving like a lot of the Jews y'all dropping as usual, and I do definitely feel like this portion, I know right now it's a defining situation. It's always scholarly. Fred single-handedly raised the ceiling of my scholar capabilities just from the level he's at. So I don't want to discount that work that has to be done. I do think, though, there's a different side of masculinity that's unconditional, that doesn't really matter what women are doing, what we're defined as, and that's that work that a man has to do to be able to deal with the challenges of life. A man has to do to be able to, if he loses his mother, not lose his mind. You know what I'm saying? I've been talking to Sean about this offline, just trying to kind of define, like, if we were to loosely have what are some practices as men we could be practicing just for us to get to strengthen, ourselves and really, because we got to be. I know that vulnerabilities, that shit, whatever. We got to be some hard motherfuckers to live in this world.
But that's what I'm saying. When we brought up the mythopoetic movement, like, they really had like some good tenets in it. When you look at it, it's just where it was going towards. You know what I'm saying? So what he's asking is, we do need to build the spaces for men to get together, to be able to express themselves, to be able to let out emotions. Yeah. And my thing is that I'm not on TV because we at war. They don't need to see black men cry. I don't give a fuck what nobody say. Nigga don't need to be crying on TV. But I'm saying, like, amongst brothers, that we need to be able to fight. We need to be able to cry. We need to be able to
full spectrum of human expression.
And that's why I like the mythos poetic movement, because if you read what they were doing in it, they were pulling from every ancient culture, the Indian culture, African. They did the whole hodgepodge. I'm like, oh, I see you, but you was using it to.
Yeah, and I think
dominate me
more practically, right? Like, you should be able to. If you can't, I would find it hard pressed for you to say you can't. But identify a particular black man that's doing things that you appreciate in the community, that's doing things in whatever profession they're in, anything that you find admirable, and mimic it. I think that's one of the easiest and quickest ways to address this self-defining phenomena of manhood, right? Like, how do you define the unexplainable type of deal? Like, and I think it's because you do it through what other examples are.
And that was the good thing about R.W. Connell's work. Like, certain things I agree with, certain things I did. But one of her definition of masculinity was, she tried to differentiate the relation and behavioral, because that's what we're talking about too, versus, the other shit. I love that about, which, you know what I'm saying? The thing is, when we deep dive and we exploring everything we can get our hands on in terms of gendering.
Oh, absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? Because we got to know where they were thinking about, how it comports to what we're trying to do, and how we're going to infuse it into what we got going on. That's why I keep saying
it'll manifest today.
Yeah, that's why we need to we need to reach back to West Africa. But I want to do a whole show on West Africa and masculinity on that. We can do that.
So, question: you define masculinity. Yeah. How do you define being a man? And are they synonymous?
You see,
or is there a difference? And what does it look like?
But when you're born male. We ain't talking about that.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? That's why I wanted to give a definition of masculinity, because masculinity and male and man. You know what I'm saying?
Those are three different things. Yeah, absolutely. So, because I think, for example, I think a woman can have masculine energy.
That's why the definition was a woman that's mannish.
Yeah, there's some basic tenets, I think, that you could, obviously look through the past and find common thread through other cultures where no matter your gender identification or your sexual orientation, more so, there are some common things that define, your ability to walk on in society as a man that are very, very, I think, what's the word? So not inherent, not born with, but that you normalize through social interactions. And that to me, I think, is different. Now, has manhood changed in terms of definition over time? I don't think so. I think there's some very basic tenets that are always reigning true. Now, how cleverly you can describe them, define them, that changes. But, standing on your word, that's every being, any human.
But that's what I think Dr. King was saying when he said, don't let nobody take your manhood. what he was speaking to, you know. But this is the pilot episode, brother.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And this is a very ramifying topic. Our next episode, we need to touch on the roadway inlet into the dichotomy of masculine, feminist.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah, because see, that's the other thing too. You're right. They're trying to swap roles.
The gender bender.
Yeah. The gender bender.
Yeah.
I like that.